Okay, the show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, and I am Barry Musa. We are about to go now for our discussion zone as we party scatter the place. Laughter, tears, and goosebumps is where you can find this beautiful record of Fireboy DML. 14 minutes past 2 p.m. And yeah, this is it. Let's go for some talks right here.
I love Africa Global Radio.
All right, welcome to the discussion zone on the Africa Daily Show. I am Barry Musa, and I've got my colleagues Epifania and Hafiz Gunu right here, so we can delve into matters. Now, you are welcome to join us also with your thoughts, comments, and contributions via our Facebook page, Africa Global Radio, on Twitter, AF Global Radio, the hashtag is the Africa Daily Show, or through our WhatsApp platform, +233 20706468. Listen to the show live on africaglobalradio.com Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. GMT, or later on, AGR on demand on africaglobalradio.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch it in the discussion zone for today on YouTube, Africa Global Radio. Okay, so we have been, talking about impactors, difference makers, those who actually make difference in their fields, respectively. And don't forget, we're still in the Black History Month. We have just 3 days to go. But then again, even if it's just a second to go, we have the opportunity to celebrate or talk about people, global Africans, global conscious African minds out there who've actually done, contributed their quota to the development of a certain space. And yesterday we looked at entertainment, and it was very interesting. Countless names. I think the names that we mentioned were even less than the ones that are yet to be mentioned. So was in the science space and what have you. Today we're looking at education, very, very important place, a bit synonymous to the scientists, though, because some of them actually pose as teachers, lecturers, and what have you. But then generally we're looking at global Africans and their impact and their contribution to education. Let me start with Hafiz Gunu. Hafiz,
Charlie,
how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Great. We cannot, talk about contributors, developments, without mentioning those who actually started the whole cycle, from our various classrooms, lecture halls, and what have you. Right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, in the spirit of Black History Month,
Yeah.
we are still waxing lyrical about our achievers.
Absolutely.
In terms of and this time around, we've shifted the conversation into the realms of education.
True.
Yes, and these days, when in these parts, actually, when someone graduates from secondary school,
Okay.
or that is the senior high these days, rather, senior high or the university,
Yeah.
the next step, they are actually exploring the possibility of traveling abroad, especially to the United States,
Yeah.
to pursue further education.
Yeah.
And thanks to the tons of historically black colleges and universities, they've made this possible not just for the African American community, but they are more than ready to welcome their African brothers as well. Now, I think it goes without saying that this hasn't always been the story. It has not always been this rosy when it comes
Okay.
to accessing quality education, not for the African American and not for the African
Right.
that decides to travel abroad. It has always been a difficult case. And so, in my readings, in the fight for a better and equal opportunity in terms of education,
Right.
came across a particular name that was of interest. Yes, and the name was Thurgood Marshall.
Okay.
Yes, and in a bit, just to provide context, I'll definitely tell you how exactly what he did to contribute to good education, especially in the African American community.
Okay.
Now, you need to understand that the African American education wasn't much of a priority in the United States.
Right.
There was a time that it just basically took the back seat. It wasn't something that authorities cared about.
Okay.
Now, after the Civil War, which ended in 1877 in the United States, there was they went through a period they call the Reconstruction period.
Okay.
Now, during this time, there was a lot of conversation, especially one that dominated and generated a lot of heated debates was one surrounding voting rights for African Americans. Now, in there somewhere, there was also conversations about education. So,
Right.
public education actually became a thing around those times.
Mm.
Now, speaking of public education, it wasn't a priority because, I mean, if you look at funding, for instance,
Yeah.
I mean, black schools either lacked or didn't get any sort of funding. Yes,
Okay.
they were
Yeah.
yes, they
Yeah.
were
Just
also
like I mentioned.
exactly. So they were in even structures that uh, you couldn't write home about. I mean,
Mm.
structures that were in a deplorable state.
Right.
And even when it comes to the teachers weren't paid as the same amount as their white counterparts. There
Yeah.
was a lot of issues
Mm.
going on there in that department. Anyway, and so this whole issue went on and on, especially when it came to issues of segregation as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you weren't allowed to use certain spaces, so
Mm-hmm.
it created a whole lot of problem, especially when you wanted to access education.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to drag it for issues of time.
Yeah.
I'm just going to fast forward it. And so, to deal with the issues of segregation,
Mm.
5 states decided to take this issue of inequality in the public space, especially in education, to
Okay.
court, take it up.
Yeah.
And these five were Delaware, South Carolina, Kansas, Virginia, and if I'm not mistaken, Washington also.
Okay.
Yes, so they decided to take it to court, and it became consolidated under the name Brown versus Board of Education. So if you
Mm.
Google Brown versus Board of Education,
Okay.
this whole issue will come up.
Mm.
Now, where does Thurgood Marshall comes in all of this? He was actually the lawyer that argued the case.
Mm.
Yes, in the courts, and not surprisingly, I mean, they won the case. Yes, and
Okay.
yes, by an overwhelming 9-0 decision in court. Now
Wow.
he then went on to become the first African American to serve in the Supreme Court of the United States. So
Okay.
because of the work he did, I mean, a lot more kids were able to access education
Wow.
in the United States.
Wow. Super. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. It's not just about celebrating, but picking bits of history that sometimes we need to revisit. We share those with you right here as well. So it's kind of like whilst you're actually thinking about a particular topic, you get to, you just get a bit of more of like a sneak peek of how the bigger picture looks like. And that was Hafiz Gunu. Let's hear my colleague Epifania. Epi. We're talking education today and global contributors by global Africans, yeah?
Yes, I think it's important.
Yeah.
And Hafiz has given a background on it, but
Mm.
I also want to start from the first African American teacher, or she was also an army nurse. I think
Okay.
we've talked about her a couple of times.
Yeah.
Susie Ken Taylor.
Yes, yeah,
This
remember.
was somebody whose grandmother used to nudge her to read because she believed she could achieve better
Mm.
and do more if she was actually literate. So they would usually wrap and hide her books
Mm.
so the police would not necessarily take them away from her. And
Right.
with her ability to read and write, she was actually able to teach some of the army officials.
Mm.
So she became more like a secretary for them.
Okay.
And what she decided to do was start teaching small girls and little children as well how to read and write.
And
But all
write.
this was done in secret.
Okay.
Yes.
You're not supposed to be seen.
Exactly.
Mm.
All this was done in secret. So
Right.
she's one of the first people I'd like us to actually acknowledge.
Mm.
Because I don't think if she had actually hadn't taken the initiative,
Mm-hmm.
most of these people would not be able to write their memos,
Mm-hmm.
read and understand it,
Yeah.
forge a path
And even
forward
encourage others,
to be able
to take on that
Ex-
cause. All right.
Yes.
Mm.
Now, one person who I would say, though not African or of
Mhm.
African descent, but then I mean is of the African conscious mind.
Mind.
I'm looking at Prudence Crandall, and she happened to be the first person
Mm.
to actually admit a black
Oh,
colored person
okay.
into her school.
Wow.
She actually
Wow.
agreed to teach
Mm.
one girl.
Okay.
Yes, and she was the beginning. The girl's name was Sarah Harris, and Sarah
Okay.
was the beginning of Prudence actually opening up
Mhm.
to colored people,
Okay.
as they used to call them then.
Yeah.
But then she actually opened a school, a boarding school for African American girls only. When she actually started by taking in Sarah,
Mhm.
most of the Europeans then did not like it,
Mhm.
so they withdrew their awards from the school. hoping that that kind of action
Yeah.
would shake Prudence a
And
bit and
then,
make her kick
reverse
Sarah
her
out.
yeah,
Exactly. But
yeah.
then she actually stood her ground. And then she still had, it was mixed, it was segregated.
Yeah.
But then she closed the school down temporarily
Okay.
and then opened it. When she opened back, this
Mm.
time she was only taking African Americans.
Wow.
So she trained them, taught them, but
Mm.
unfortunately, it didn't really go that far because in the year 1890, she had to close down the school because there was a mob convergence in front of the school, and she was bothered about the safety
Of the
of
kids.
these children.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. You take your child to school and then, because another I don't even know how to call another person's child, because they don't have the same skin color as yours, so you go withdraw yours because
You can understand. I can understand your frustration. I mean, I can feel it.
it's just you can't comprehend it. I don't know.
Why the hate?
Is it hate? I think if for a lack of a better word, yes, hate. But wow, man, you have to hide and teach. Kudos to what's the name again? Sarah.
Prudence?
No, no,
Sarah was
Sarah
the
was the
student,
yeah.
and then the person who actually told the teacher was
Yeah,
Prudence.
and okay, epic.
And let's also not forget Ruby Bridges.
Okay.
She was actually the first, more known as the brave black child, but she actually was the first to desegregate
Okay.
these segregated schools.
Mm.
She happened to be the first black girl to actually go into an all, for lack of a better word, but all white school.
Okay.
And I mean, when
And it becomes
It
a
was-
thing, like when you find yourself, in a school made of only Europeans or a segregated school, and so you make history. How can that be? How can that be a thing?
she actually did make history, but it was also dangerous because at that time,
Yeah.
when she was going, she was literally given protection. She had bodyguards in
Because
front and then
because
behind
y-
her.
yeah.
Because you could see a mob of angry parents who didn't understand why they actually are allowing a black girl into the same school with their
Oh
children.
dear. I think talking about accessibility to education, bringing it back home to these parts of the world, I think it's very easy for us here. Like absolutely very easy. The only thing we can talk about is more of like the financial constraints that is attached to it. Sometimes you cannot get the best of education if you're not really financially fit, right? So you go like the 50-50 one, but for you to get that really top notch, you need to be very well, financially fit.
Well, some of us are. I mean, we are lucky to live in an era where, yes, it's not the ideal condition, but you can say that these days education has been commodified. I mean, normally now for you to get the quality education
Uh-huh.
you're craving for, then
Uh-huh.
it means you'd have to pay huge sums of money.
Yep.
Yes, it's not just about access these days, but it's about the quality
Yeah.
and the sort of education you are getting. I mean, she did mention how some were attacked and everything, and
Mhm.
it reminds me of in one of the episodes that we had, I made mention of the Little Rock Nine. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, who
yeah,
had to be
yeah.
given protection simply because they wanted to access education. Yes, it created so much an uproar that they had to be given protection, a protection detailed by the president, just so they,
Can you imagine?
just for protection anyway. So, I mean, we've come a long way. I mean, we've come a long way in terms of accessing education. I mean, if you talk about the HBCUs now, I mean, you can count lots of
Yeah.
them. I mean,
Yeah.
lots of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have a lot of people who are, let's say, people who have actually come out from the HBCUs doing amazing and great and actually giving back to the community.
Mhm.
You have a lot of them,
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we have quite interesting names. I mean, we have names such as Cornel West, a political activist going back to the 70s. He continues to encourage his colleagues to lead by example by participating in civic discourses and encouraging them to actually, talk about issues that has to do with segregation. Not giving access to African American, children, people in general, education, which was something that was very, very, important at that time. Now, Bobby Austin, also one of those who actually contributed, to ensuring that the voice, because it cannot be the voice of one particular group. It's more of like a collective thing. So these people, this parts of the country, they're talking the eastern parts, the southern parts, the northern and the west. So it's more of like it became more of a thing that everywhere you go, there's that voice that you hear advocating for the inclusion of the people, of the children to get access to school. Very sad, eh?
Yeah, interesting times. I mean, even on the same platform, I remember you talked about W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yep,
Yeah, Du
yep,
Bois.
yep, yep,
And
yep.
yes, so W.E.B. there stands for William Edward Burghardt. Yes, and his contribution. For me, when it comes to his contribution, when it comes to education, is the fact that, I mean, this was the first African American that earned a PhD from the University of Harvard.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
Harvard
exactly.
University. And yes, and he had to go through education through the donations of the church and his neighbors. That was how he paid for himself through school. But I think one contribution I think he made towards education was the fact that he became a well-known critic of Booker T. Washington. And
Okay.
yes, and in the fact that Booker T. Washington is what you call in modern language or in millennial language a sellout, because this was a man that also an academician, but he he kept preaching that African Americans should accept segregation in exchange for vocational training.
Mm.
Yes, and W.E.B. Du Bois was like, no, that is not going to happen. What we want is equal rights.
Mm.
And I think the fact that he became a known critic of Booker T, because Booker T was became an advisor to so many presidents. So imagine someone of an African American origin giving such advice out to
They would welcome it with
exactly
open
so
arms,
so the
yeah.
fact that he consistently criticized his works for me is a huge part, is a huge win for
Right,
me. Yes,
right,
and
right.
What did you say that both W. Du Bois and Booker T were actually looking for the same thing?
how so?
Just that coming from different angles.
No, but if there's a
But they
but
both
in the
were they both
conversation,
not looking for their advancement?
No.
if
One
the,
was saying they should accept the status quo and then make just, it's almost like you want a seat at the table
yeah,
and someone is telling you, okay, since you are not getting a seat,
Mhm.
why don't you just ask someone to shift slightly and make way for you? And another one is telling you, no, make room for me at that table.
yeah, yeah.
It's almost like when you come to the African context, the UGCC and the CPP.
Mm-hmm.
CPP were clamoring for
Now, self-government
independence and
now,
self-government now.
Yeah.
One was saying, let's do it gradually.
progressively, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah,
Because I mean, there are different schools of school of thoughts that believe that as much as W. Du Bois and Booker T were like almost on the opposite ends of the coin, they were literally clamoring for the same thing, just that they had different philosophies.
Ah, well.
all right. So we have names such as Ramona Edlin. The National Urban Coalition started the Say Yes to a Youngsters Future program to provide education to help black teachers and youth in America, eventually teaming with the Department of Education. So she was also part of that particular organization. Now, Nathan Harray, the first, who is more of like parts and headed the first university black students program in the United States was directed by him, Nathan Harry. And when his administration attempted to cut the program by half, he protested with students for 5 months to ensure that there is always that inclusion and no cuts of anything that has to do with half of our cause, or we need to have limited time, or we don't need to have this duration, or more of like our learning and teaching and learning hours should be slashed because we're the minority group. No. And of course, we have Catherine Butler Jones, the Metropolitan Council for Education Opportunities. She was actually the brainchild of Jones, and still works to educate black youth in Boston. I mean, countless names. If you ask me, Epi.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have something to say, or we can just wrap it up because
I think
mean,
we can look at Kelly Miller, who was the country's first African American graduate student in mathematics.
oh, okay.
And he became a prominent voice later on for civil rights, something that was like very important back then because you have people who. One thing I liked about them was the fact that anytime they gained education or they actually had some form of education, they took it and then went back to the blackboard and found a way to use their voice in whatever space they
to
found
make way
themselves
for
in
others
to
who
push
do
for
not have the
civil rights.
opportunity. That
Exactly.
is true. I
That
think
was
most
something they were pushing
most
for.
educators are at the same time double as activists as well, because when you're educated, you're enlightened, you'd be forced to speak up, for your people who have not actually had the opportunity. Yeah.
And then Fanny Jackson Coppin. So
Okay.
she happened to be the first African American principal.
Okay.
Yes. And for the 37 years that she served, she actually brought about many improvements in Philadelphia's educational system.
Right. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Hafiz, finals.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about them all day. We can talk about black achievers in the domain of education all day, and not even scratch the surface.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah, that's true.
But it only goes for us. I mean, it's the Black History Month, and it's a month we get to reflect and appreciate the
efforts,
sacrifice and the efforts of those before us.
True,
Yes, and not to
true.
take what we have now for granted. Yes, and hopefully, I just think that this is a time for discussions, conversations surrounding what can be done to advance the cause of the black community, not just in the diaspora, but ways and avenues to welcome the African brothers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, each and every now. I mean, America seems to be getting a lot of Africans traveling in there for higher education and everything.
Yeah.
And I think the HBCUs are a huge part of that.
Right.
And hopefully it would open up conversations on what to do. What can be done to make that an even more a prominent feature
Okay.
of some form of cooperation, if we can have that when it comes to cooperation between universities and everything. So
Yeah.
you have say a situation where universities have their best students from here
Okay.
traveling to some of these places to continue their education and then come back to help
Right.
communities. So in terms of an exchange program,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
some of these situations where you have students from the African American community come
Okay.
down here to experience the life here, take back their experience out there, and also help. We are sitting here and talking about how we want to destroy certain stereotypes.
Okay.
Such exchange programs could actually help, where you have them come in here, gain some level of experience, get exposed to the African life. When they go out there and there's a certain narrative being spun about Africa,
They can correct
they
it.
definitely will be able to be in the position to inform and educate and
Right,
hopefully correct
right.
that.
Okay. Thank you, Hafiz. Epi.
Yeah, I'd say as much as we've done good. We've come far, looking at where we come from, but I believe there's more to be done. More work can go into it. There's much more development, and not just looking at the fact that it's all sunny out there over
Okay.
here as well. I think there's certain schools located in certain localities or rural areas that are not getting as much as attention as
Yeah.
they need.
Yeah. Very true.
Procurement, the right equipment, the right instruments, the tools. The teachers literally, some of them don't even have the books they need to teach.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make the profession lovely
Palatable.
one for them.
Don't want
at
to get
all.
there.
And then they tend to take their frustration on the students, which I don't think should be the case. I think that if we're looking at educating, because education is the key.
True.
We say it's a cliche, but then we don't understand it. If we do understand, I believe we put much effort in knowing that it actually determines how an individual is going to think and
Yeah.
the kind of decisions they will take in the future. So let's do a better job in our educational systems.
Okay. Thank you. Let's do a better job in providing the future generations with proper quality education. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, and I am Barry Musa.